Okay, so we've come to the end of the unit and now it's time to revise over everything you've done using spreadsheets. Now, when you do the test, you're not likely to do things like charts. Obviously, we did do some charts in there where we were looking at inserting a chart. There was other things where we did with filters. We did quite a lot of this filter stuff, but we're not going to be able to do that. The main thing in the test that you will need to look at will be the functions. So you've been provided with this function list. So this is the PDF, which of course you can download off my website. And they're alphabetically ordered, I think. I hope they are. Yeah, looks like they are all alphabetically ordered. So I can see all the different functions that we used throughout this unit in year 8. So the first one I can see is the average, and just to go through how this looks, because for some of you it could look a little bit confusing when you first look at it. It gives a description about what this does. Okay, so it gives a numerical average value in a data set, ignoring any text. So that just means in a data set, so from cells that you have in a spreadsheet, so on the left here I've got some cells, A1 to A10. If they contain numbers, it would give me a numerical value, which would be the average of those numbers. Now, what kind of average is this? Well, this is the mean average. So the mean average is all of the numbers added together divided by the number of numbers that you are looking to get an average from. And then here we've got some sample usage and how this works. So here you can see we've got an average where we've got a range here, another range, and then a couple of numbers. So you can do things like this. This isn't the most common way that we might do it. We would probably just do average and a range of cells and not have any other things separated by commas. We usually have a range just like that. Okay, so what can we do to practice some of these? Well, we can import a spreadsheet from the website, which is one of the ones that we did before, and we can just try and do some of these functions, in fact all of them, to practice. Okay, so you've got quite a lot of them. Now the next thing you can see after seeing some examples of how it can be used, it gives you the syntax. So the syntax is basically how it needs to be written or how it needs to be put together. So here you can see it explains a little bit about that. Of course, you got to remember that all of these functions do have an equal sign on front of them. It doesn't appear here, but that's how you would write it in your spreadsheet. And this one just shows you the syntax where you write the word average, you have an open bracket, you have whatever values that you want in there, and then you have a closed bracket. Okay, so that is exactly what it is. So here you can see you could put value 1 and you could say put 1 in there, and the next one could be 2, 3, 4 separated by commas, or you can do things like this. Okay, so the syntax is just showing you that has to be written open brackets and close parenthesis brackets. In the count, a lot of them are very similar, so you can see count is exactly the same, but you're just doing something different, right? So returns the number of numeric values in a data set. So the number of numbers in a data set. So if I have numbers and letters in A1 to A10, for example, down here, this would just show you that it would count up all the ones that just have a number in that cell and ignore any of the other ones that have nothing or have some text in it instead. And then count A, well, you can see count A counts anything. So returns the number of values in a data set. So this is basically if A1 to A10 all contains text and numbers, then the answer would come back saying 10 because 10 cells have 10 things in them, right? So returns the number of values, any values in a data set. So as you go on, the first few ones like that count A and the average and so on, they're fairly simple ones. But of course, then you get down to count if, and you can see a couple of different examples here. So we're looking at a range of cells, and here we're looking to say, are any of those cells greater than 20? Right, so that's an interesting thing that you can do. You can do equal to 20, you could do greater than 20, you could do less than 20, you could do greater than or equal to 20. So you imagine all those possibilities are there. And then the other one is where you can actually look for a specific word. So in this case, if any of the cells contain the word paid, right? So there's that example there. We go down to the if function, and this is one that quite a lot of students find difficult. And here you can see we've got an example of usage. So if A2 is equal to the word foo, with written in quotes like that, then it would return this. Okay. Now, as you can see, there's no false value. So usually it says a true or a false. Something to do if it's false, but in this case you can see it just does nothing if it's false. So if A2, this cell, does not say the word foo in it, then it would just say nothing. And then here we've got if A2, then A2 was true, and then this is the false. Okay, and here you can see how the syntax, we have a logical, what we call a logical expression, where you're asking a question. If a cell contains a number, if it contains some text, like in this example up here, or if a cell is greater than a certain number, or less than, or greater than or equal to, and things like that. And then you do what you want to do if it's true, and what you want to do if it's false. Okay, so you could do calculations, or you could just say something like A2 is foo, as it says up here, or A2 was true. Right, so that's the option. You can say something, or you could do a calculation, like a formula where you multiply something or divide by something. Okay, so it does go on, and you've got Lookup in there, and you can see the examples of how it looks. Read through that, read through all the different ones. You got max, median, min. Median is obviously an average as well, but it's a specific type of average. Returns the median value in the numeric set, so the one in the middle, essentially. You've got min, you've got mode as well, which is the most commonly occurring value in a set. And then we've got the round function, and SUMIF, and Vlookup. Okay, so they're all the ones that we're going to look at. Now, what I'm going to do is just import a CSV. So this would be one of the ones that we did from before. So I will do upload, and I'm just going to take down the one from the previous lesson. So that was the ssd.csv, this one here. Just bring that in, import data. And this is just one way to revise over the work that you have done in the unit, and just try some different functions and so on. Okay, so what we can do, we've got a data set here. We haven't got this manufacturer, that was from the other sheet. So we could probably get it and bring it in if we wanted to, if you wanted to get that information as well. So I might get that a little bit later just to practice the Vlookup or Lookup and so on. Vlookup and Lookup are very much the same, so there wouldn't be too much that you would have to worry about that. So like if we look at this as an example, so let's say we just want to do on the side here, we'll do some example formulas. Okay, so here we did this last lesson, it was working out the price per gigabyte. So it was essentially just division. You did a formula for this, so you just did that divided by that, right? And you got, did I do that right? Is it coming up white or something? Oh yeah, it's just a bit slow to come up. So it comes up with that answer there, and then I can drag that down. I can change this to currency and different things like this if I want to. So as you remember from the last lesson, so I've got here and go to euro, and there we have it. So what could I do with this? Well, I could say get the average. So the average price per gigabyte as an example. Okay, so I'm just going to drag that out a little bit. So there's one thing I can do. So if I'm looking at this first one to practice how to do the average, I want to look at how I can do that. Well, it's dead easy here. I just do the equal sign in here. So if I had a question that asked me to do this, I would write equals average, open the brackets. Now looking at the spreadsheet, I just then have to put in the values. Here's the syntax. So I've opened the bracket, put in the values that I want, and those values can be a range. So if I want to look at average price per gigabyte, then I'm going to want to look at this one. So drag and pick all of those cells. So in some of the questions, it might say to do something like an average between one cell and another. So here you can see I'm doing it between G2 and G106. So that's got a range in it right there. So my average price per gigabyte is €2.22. Okay, so you can see that, and then we could say, like, if I wanted to try that other average, which was, for example, the mode, and the mode was what? Well, it was the, if I just scroll down to it, the mode was the most occurring value in the data set. So what could we do for there? Well, I could do most common price, something like that. Price per gigabyte. Let's drag that out a bit longer. And then I can do the mode for that. Now, if I wanted to, we can talk about then relative and absolute cell referencing for this, because when I do the mode for this one, I'm going to want to count all the ones that are sort of being repeated here. Now, it could be the case where none of them are repeated, and I can't actually see any of them specifically here that are repeated, but there might be ones that are the same price, but there's quite a lot of them. So I want to find that out. Now, here, as you can see, if I double click on this range of cells, what is that? That range of cells is a relative range of cells. So what's the difference between relative and absolute? Well, notice the way this comes up orange here with my selection, okay? Now what I'm going to do is copy this one down. If I copy that down, it still says 222 there. I double click on it, look what's happened. The orange range is gone down one. So this top one's not selected anymore. So that means that if I wanted to copy this range, it's not exactly the same range. So if I go down to the bottom, you will notice that I'm actually now got another one that I've selected down here, which is not one that I want. So it's actually moved the range. So relative ranges will move when you copy down functions or formulas. So the same applies here, where I did E2 divided by F2. If I had kept those as absolute, then this wouldn't have changed to F3 divided by F3, E3 divided by F3, and this wouldn't have changed to F4 divided by F4. So let's have a look at what happens if I change F2, for example, to absolute. So I do that with the dollar sign. So dollar sign in front of the letter, dollar sign after the number, and press enter. Now, that one's fine, it still stays the same. But if I drag these down now, the numbers are now calculating differently. And if I look at these formulas, like this one, it's still doing F2. So see what I'm dividing now? I'm dividing this cell, which has changed relative. So when I pull this function down, it changes relatively down like this. But this cell stayed the same. And that's what it means by absolute. It sounds a little bit weird when you hear these terminology, absolute and relative. But it essentially is when you've got these dollar signs, this cell stays the same. And it's very similar to like what you had to do with named cells or named ranges, that where you use the name instead, that would kind of be very similar to doing like an absolute formula. Okay, now obviously in this case I do not want to do it absolute, so I want to basically take that out and then just multiply by that and have them both being relative and drag that down. Okay, so they're all relative in this case. But over here, I could, if I wanted to, I know I'm using the same range, but maybe I want to change the function. So in this case, I could click in here and do F4, and then when I copy this down, you can see now that it's exactly the same because I've got these dollar signs here, which means it's still taking G2 to G106 rather than G3 to G107. Now, of course, I don't want to get just the average anymore, so I want to just change that to mode and press enter, and there you go. So my mode is 2.4. I could change that to euros. So the most common price per gigabyte is £2 or €2.40. Okay, so supposedly that's what it's worked out here. Now you could look through them all and see if you could find the number of ones that says it, but there's 240 there, and it probably appears somewhere else. Okay, now what other functions could we do? Well, we could also do things like rounding. We can do the minimum. So what would be the minimum used for? Well, that would be to find the cheapest one, right? So the minimum price, right, or the lowest price, let's say, per gigabit. So we'll do lowest price per GB. And here it's almost the same formula, right? Just drag it down because I've got absolute, the absolute range. And instead of mode, I'm just going to put min. So a lot of these functions are very, very similar. So look, the lowest price per gigabyte is 51. Okay, so then what could I do as well here? Well, then I want to find out the highest, right? So same again, highest price per gigabyte. And I'm just going to copy that down again because I've got the same range, and then just change the actual function name. So max this time, and press enter, and the maximum price per gig is €4.80. So that's quite a lot actually per gigabyte. So that would be a very expensive SSD drive on your computer if you were to buy that one. Now, what else can we do? Well, we can do things like count and COUNTIF. Now, the count and count A, the count is just essentially giving us a count of how many values there are here. So if you did count or count A, let's say you could do one or the other. You don't really need to do both. If we just did count and we did this model here, so these are all different models, aren't they? Well, actually, some of them are repeated. So maybe we could use this over here where these S codes, I suppose, are different. I'm not sure if any of them repeat as well. I think they are all different ones. So what we could do is just do a count. Now, because these are text in here, we can't do count. So let's say if we do number, and we'll call it number of products, SSD products. So this is basically how many we have in stock. So let's say I do an equals count, open the brackets, and I try to count this. I'm not going to include the S code, of course. Select all of these all the way down. And this is a relative range again. I haven't made it absolute or anything. Close the brackets, and what I get 0. And why did I get 0? Well, I already explained it, because this contains text. I know it contains some numbers there, but it's text and numbers. Now, what I would need to do then is, obviously the count is no good because it only counts values that are numeric. So if I do A, count A, there you go. Now I get 105. So it's telling me that I've got 105 SSD hard drive products right there. So that's the count. Now, the other thing you can do would be things like the COUNTIF and things like that, right? So the COUNTIF is quite good to see if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to look at the price per gig again, and I wanted to look at all the ones that are over, or let's say just the price, all the ones that are over 60, for example. So I'm just going to take this one and I'm going to move it down. You should be able to grab it like this. Just drag it down one. It hasn't moved, changed the formula or anything. Okay, so number, I'm going to do number of SSDs under, let's see, under 80 euros, right? So 80, I'll put the euro sign there, under 80 euros. Right, so how do I do that one? Well, this one, I can even, if I want to, I can drag it down, put it somewhere else. But here I would do count if. So if I do the count if, I'm going to be looking at the actual price here instead. So I'm going to take all of these ones, this range, like that. And that says F2 to F106. Then I do a comma. So this one is a little bit different. So you have to look out for these ones. So I do the comma, and then basically I need to then specify the criteria. So if I'm looking over here, you can see I've got a count if, range, and then the criterion. So the criterion is what pattern, it says here, pattern or test to apply to the range. So what I want to do is say all the ones that are under 80 euros. So how did we do that? Well, there was a couple of ways you could probably do this. We did have an example here. So this example was looking at this range of cells and seeing if they were greater than 20. So I just want to almost do the same thing, but do less than 80. Okay, so double quotes, and then inside those quotes, I'm going to do the less than sign and do 80, and then close the brackets. And there we go. I've got 25 SSD drives that are under 80 euros. Okay, so these are kind of statistics that we can work out, find out, and use. Right, so the next one we could look at would be let's have a look. Well, we could look up the Vlookup one, right? So in the Vlookup one, I need that manufacturer's document as well. So with the manufacturers, it was the other file. So I've just downloaded it. So what I'm going to do is do import and upload, select the file, and it was called ssd.csv. Now this one would be a lookup or a Vlookup. Now some of you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, what is the difference between a lookup and a Vlookup? Well, let's have a look at that. Excuse the pun. So here we've got a couple of different ones. We've got HLOOKUP, this one here. Now you can imagine HLOOKUP and Vlookup, they're pretty much the same. What that does is that looks at a horizontal array, they call it, or a table, right? So a horizontal one. Now this to me looks a little bit confusing. This looks more easier to understand. So here, for example, the first bit of information you put in before a comma is what you're wanting to search, right? So that's usually just one cell. So here you look search key, the value to search for example, 42 cats or I-24, something like that. And then you've got a range. Now the range or array is the range of cells in that table. And then you've got an index. Now the index, it says if index is not between 1 and the numbers of rows in the range, is value is returned. So the range is usually two rows or columns, okay? And then you've got this index, which is which one do you want to return back, the first one or the second one. and then you then can also specify whether it is sorted or not. So this is actually the main difference between HLOOKUP, I believe, and Lookup, that you can actually say if it is sorted or not, if the information is sorted. So let's have a look at Lookup. So here you can see the same thing for our Lookup. You've got a search key, you've got a range, which is just the range again, and it says search result array, and then result range is in like that's kind of almost like the index, like what ones you want it to return, but it doesn't give you the option in a lookup to see whether it is sorted or not. So what lookups looks through a sorted row. So that means it's an order of like A to Z and things like that. Okay. So here I'm just going to say insert new sheet for this one and import that data. So it's coming up as a new sheet here. Did I just do the wrong one? I probably did. Yeah, I'll just remove that one then, actually. What one does I want to do? Manufacturer, that's what I was getting the wrong one, of course. Right, so upload, and it was the SSD manufacturer. I did SSD again. Easy mistake. Insert new sheets, import the data. So if I'm looking at now I've got this as a new sheet down here. Let's look at the lookup. Now, this lookup, would this work if I was to look up these values? So this is my search range. So see what it says search range? That is all of these bits here. Maybe don't need to include the top two, they're kind of like the titles. Now, the result range in a lookup would be this. This is the result range, what you want to come back. So if I'm looking up here in manufacturer, I wanted to look up what this M code is equivalent to. Well, A is equivalent to this one here, right? And C is equivalent to this. But if I use a lookup, you can see that this says it has to be sorted, or it should be sorted. So this doesn't look as if it's sorted because I've got A, C, B. It's not, I've got P there, I've got D. So it's not in necessarily alphabetical order. As such, it does look more like it is sort of here in this one, but not for this one. So I'm probably safer if I go for a VLOOKUP in this situation. So here you can see I've got a search key, the range. So the range would be all of these. So it would be A2 to B16. The index would be 2 because it's the second column that I want it to return, right? And then I can leave this empty if I want, or I can say if it's sorted or not. So what can you do if it's sorted? Well, if it's sorted, you would say true. You put a true value there, and it does do true by default. So that means that if I just left it out, if I don't even, after the index number, I just leave nothing, it will do it by true. And if I say it's not sorted, if it's not sorted and I put false, then it hopefully will do this correctly. So we'll give it a go and try and see what happens, okay? Now in this one, as you remember from last week, I had to make this range absolute because I didn't want it to change and select, say, for the next one down these ones, and then the next one down those ones like that, because these cells have nothing, and then I'm missing ones at the top, okay? So here I will do equals VLOOKUP, right? V because my table or range is in sort of vertically down 2 columns. And the first thing I put in here will be that search, okay? So here you can see the search key. So the search key is this one, right? So I need to search for B2, in this case, this cell. I want to search for the letter A, and then I just do a comma. Now, that B2 wants to be relative because when I pull this function down, I want this one to change to this one, then to change to that one, and so on, and all the way down. So after the comma then, I need to go to get my range, right? So this range here in the VLOOKUP. So with the range, what do? I go to my other sheet, click on that, and I select these cells. Now, what you can see it actually puts in here is a little bit extra information. It doesn't just put the range of cells, it actually puts the name of this sheet and an exclamation mark, because I've got two different sheets. So it's got the range on the end, which says A2 to B16, but it also gets the name of that sheet. Right? So that's important that it does that, because obviously there's A2 to B16 is also on the SSD sheet, but I don't want those ones, right? I want the cells on this sheet. So that's why that name's there. Now, I probably want to make this absolute. So I'm going to do the function F4, and you can see it's just put a $sign before the letter, $sign before the number. So A2 is now absolute. So it's going to be this one to B16, which is that one down here. Always, it's never going to change, right? Now, after that, I do the comma, and what was the rest of it, right? Well, the rest of the function was to do this index. So the index was which column I wanted it to return. So you can imagine sometimes you might have a column list and you've got several columns, you maybe have 10 columns. So in this case, it's dead simple. I just want the second one to be returned. So I'm just going to put a 2 there because I've only got 2 columns, so I want this one to come back. And then if I can just close it and finish it there, because that's what it says in here, that if I don't put it in, it's automatically going to put it, so is sorted true by default, right? Now, if I put false, I can put false, which is a 0, and I can put true as a 1. So I can actually just use numbers instead. So if I put 1, that would say it would be true, and if I put false, it would be 0. So if I put, I want to put 0 and close the brackets and press enter. Right, so it's gone back here and it's done that. Now, I want to drag that down so you can see a few of them. So D has gone plex store like that. So D is that one, right? So let's see what happens. I'm going to take this out and say I'll change that from being false to true. Now you can write the word true, that works as well, but I just write 1, which means it's the same as being true. So 1 is true, 0 is false. Now if I do that and do all these, do a few of these down, well, look what's happened. So I've said it is sorted, but what am I getting here? Look, that this one with the S code, this one with the I code, and this one with the O, and this one with the O as well. So which one's right? Well, actually, that one should be H, the H code. So you can see that just because that one little mistake that I said that it was sorted, that doesn't work, okay? Now, the other thing we can then look at, so that's the VLOOKUP. So obviously you know that it has to be 0 in there saying false, or you write false, because looking at the data, I could see that it wasn't sorted in order, okay? So now it looks better, okay? So if I look at S, that is Samsung, there it is, and F is SanDisk. So F is SanDisk, and that works fine. What about the lookup then? So the lookup, essentially, the VLOOKUP, you can kind of do it, which is very similar to the lookup, but you can just then specify if it is sorted or not. Let's look at the lookup and see why that one might or might not work. Well, this one just had a search key, which was the B2 again. Then we had the range. So I'm going to take out the V for VLOOKUP, and then in here I had to say the result range. Now I don't know if I can put a 2. If I put a 2, it's going to come up just saying 2, right? So it's not an index, it's not the same. So what I have to do is put actually the range of cells that I want. And I'm going to make that absolute again. So that is the whole table. The purple bit is all of this. And then the result range is these ones over here. Now, if I then run that, we get the same problem as we did with the Vlookup when we put the Vlookup saying that it was sorted. So you can see with the lookup, it doesn't work either. So it is specifically that we have to do this Vlookup in this case. Okay, so there you can see it, and it works fine. So the lookup didn't work because you can't check or specify that it's been sorted. If it has been sorted, then that's fine. But as I could see from this information, it's not sorted in order. So I specifically used Vlookup and said then, put a 0, saying it was not sorted. Okay, so that's your Vlookup, and HLOOKUP is exactly the same, except for the only difference really is that if this wasn't vertically down like this, and it was more sort of going horizontally across like that, that would be a HLOOKUP. And the HLOOKUP, the advantage of a HLOOKUP over a lookup is the same thing, that if it's not sorted, then you can use it. You can use the HLOOKUP. And if it's sorted, well, you could use a lookup. You could just use a lookup by itself for doing vertical, this vertical range of cells or horizontal range of cells. Okay, I hope that has explained that for you. Now, what else do we need to know? Well, we've done, is it the minimum, the maximum? We haven't done sum. So sum is dead easy, of course. So let's say I've got another one under here. I'm just going to do total cost, or total cost of stock, let's say, right? So let's say in here, these are all, this is all my stock, of course, that I've got in here. And I want to find out basically the price, all of these added together. So to add together, of course, you can imagine you could do equals and do a formula, F2 plus that one, plus this one, plus this one, plus this one, plus this one. Right, that would of course work, and you can see if I've just done those cells, it's added those up, but that's going to take you a lifetime. If you were to go and add up all of these, that would take a long time, right? So we don't want to really do that. So what are we doing here? We're summing, aren't we? So what we can do, equals sum, open the brackets, and just get the price. So we get the price, all of them, F2 to F106, close the bracket, and it's given me the total cost of stock that I have. So I have got 14,242 euros worth of stock currently in my computing shop where I sell SSD drives. So I've got 14,242 euros worth of SSD hard drives to sell. So that is the sum function right there. So that's one of the very first functions that most people tend to learn out of all the ones that you've got there. So we've done average, we've done count, or we did count A, we did a count if, we've got if function we could do, we did the lookup, we did max, we didn't do median, but you can understand how that works. We did the mode. We've also got the round function. So we could look at the round and how that works. So say, for example, here in this one where we've got the decimal points, you could have it where it rounds to a different number, okay, of decimal points. Now this is not really used for this kind of thing, because this is coming up and I've got it formatted as euro anyway, so it's coming up like this. But if I wanted to just get to 1 decimal point or 0 decimal points, well, I could obviously do that up here, where I can do this, which is changing the format. But if I want an actual number to be rounded, then I could put the function round this. So let's say I wanted to round anything, like, I'll just do a number. So if I did 15.8 and I want to round that to say, just round it to 0 decimal places. So here I could do equals round, open brackets, click on that cell. So that's that cell there, which contains 15.8. And because it's round, what round does, it rounds up at the halfway point. So 15.5 would be rounded up, and 15.49 would be rounded down, right? So I round it, close the brackets, and there it is, giving me 16. So it's rounded it up this time. So if I did 15.49, you can see it's now gone to 15. If I do 15.5, it's gone up to 16, right? So round basically rounds down at the halfway, below the halfway point, so 4.9, and rounds up from 15.5 upwards. Okay, there is other ones like round down if you specifically want to round down. So, but I haven't really shown you that. So say I've got 15.9, which is closer to 16. You could do things like round down, and what that's going to do is then round it down to 15. And you've got round up as well, but you don't really need to worry about those. The only one that you've really seen is just round. That's the one that we've concentrated on. Okay, so the if function then. Right, so the if function, you might want to see some sort of result from looking at a specific cell. Okay, so what if we did, say, for example, looked at the total cost of our stock, and we would want to say that, let's say, our number of SSD products, let's say we look at that one, and we've got 105, and let's say we should normally keep 150, right? So let's say that this is like the minimum that we usually want to keep. So that means that we would need to say something like over here saying order more stock, right? Okay, so what we'll do is equals if, open the bracket, and then we're going to say if this cell is less than 150, then I've got a comma. Just bring this over a little bit so you can see it. So I've got a comma there, and then what I'm going to do is then just say, if that's true, so I'm putting it in quotes, order more stock. Close the quotes. So that's if it's true. Then I put a comma and I say if it's false then. And then if it's false, I could either just have nothing. So I could actually just close it like this, and it will say order more stock. And if my stock happened to be over 105, so mine's actually got, this has got this cell, this range in it. So if I did 100, if I just change it to 160, it just says then false. Okay, so that's what it returns. But I could actually then change this. So this is just saying this logical statement. So if I go to the if, just to specifically look at it, the if function, right? So here it is here. So I'm fit it on screen a little bit here with this, right? So this one here is like this one up at the top. If J11 is less than 150, here I'm saying if A2 is equal to foo, then it says this, otherwise it does nothing, right? Which would then say false. But I can also put a false value in here. So if A2 is something, and this one, if J11 is 150, then I can say order more stock, or I could say stock full, or something like that. Okay, so, oops, Did I miss something? I put an extra bracket there. Yeah, so order more stock because I've only got 105 SSDs, and I've sort of specified here that I should keep a minimum of 150, and that's what it's then telling me. Now, in this bit, which is the true value, in that true value, I could also do a calculation. So you can see where I've just got it telling me something like it says order more stock or stock full. I've got that in quotes because this is a string of text, right? So this string of text. But if I want to do a calculation, let's say I would, instead of that, I would say instead of order more stock, I would say how much stock, right? So I could say take this cell, I could take 150 minus whatever it is in here and press enter. So it tells me I need to order 45, right? Now I think I can actually put a string in beside it as well. So I could say order 150. I think I can do this. It might come up with an error. Yeah, it does. So it probably means that I have to do like some sort of funny thing to like add that in. Yeah, so it says order 45, right? So what I've done is I've just put some text in there to say order, and then I've done a calculation. That's a formula. So I've done so it is sorry, 150 minus J11. So it tells me to order that amount. Okay, and I could change that alignment, put it over there. So I need to order 45 SSD products. So that's your basic if statement. Okay, so you've got logical statement that we're wanting to check. If J11 is less than 150, then I wanted to order, and I've got a formula in here. And then here, if it's false, it just has that text. Okay, that's it. So that's your if function. Now you can look over the nested if, and the nested if is a little bit more complicated. We did do this a little bit, but I'm not likely to give you this in the test, so I wouldn't worry too much about a nested if. I would concentrate on all the other ones that you've got there, like your Vlookup is hard enough, I believe. You've got your max, median, min, you've got these other functions that you want to look at. You've also got this last one, which is sum if. So the sum if, what could we do to do a sum if? Well, we would want to look at, let's say, cost of, let's say if we've got, for example, total like here I've got total cost of stock, which is 14,242. Right? What if I want to look at a specific manufacturer or model? So here I've got Evo there and Evo here and so on, right? So I could look at that, or I could look at this, the manufacturer. So I could look at total cost of, let's say I look at Samsung, which is supposed to be Samsung, I suppose, Samsung SSDs, right? So I'm just going to look at only the ones that say Samsung, and I want to get the price. So basically I want to add up, where it says Samsung here, I want to get 84 euros. And then further down, where I got Samsung here, I wanted to then add that 84 to 120, and then add that 84 to 120 to this one, and so on, and so on, and all the way down. So how do we do it? Right, well, I just scroll across, and I'm just going to do equals sum if. So I'm summing, and what I want to do is I want to look at a range. So the range that I want to test is this range, the one that says Samsung in it, okay? So I select all these cells, all the way down, this whole range, okay? And I don't need to do absolute or anything for this. I'm not copying this down or doing anything like that. So I've got C2 to C106, and then I do a comma, and then I need to specify the criteria. So if we look at the sheet here, you can see the criteria. You've got the options of doing things like this, like a string. So I do have a string in my case, and I need to spell it exactly the same as it's written here. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'll put in quotes, and I'll say Sam sing. Now, if it's a number you were looking at, you wouldn't need to put it in quotes, right? You would just put the number. But because it is text, I need to put it in these quotes here. So I'm looking for Samsung. I'm spelled it capital S and everything, just the exact same as it is written there. Then I do a comma, and then I want to say what do I want to add up if we get Samsung here. So this would be relative to over here, which is the price. So here you can see sum of A1 to A10 has the word paid, then sum these ones. So it's basically the same as sum, but it's looking at only specific ones. So in here, I'm going to look at the price, for example. So total cost of Samsung SSDs, and I'm looking at all these prices, but it's not going to add all of these prices. It's only going to add the ones that have relative to that one Samsung on there. So close the bracket, and I can change that to the euro sign. And as you can see, it is not the same number as this one, because this is sum, which is adding all of the prices together. And I've only got, out of that 14,242, Samsung counts for 2,183 euros worth of that. Okay, so that's that last one done. Okay, so that's all the functions, and that's what you're mainly going to be tested on for the end of unit test.